Good evening and welcome to the Warrant Committee. We'd like to thank everybody who's watching for their patience on a late start. This is a April vacation edition of the Warrant Committee. So we're in a little smaller room, a little more intimate crowd. We have some people on Zoom from the committee who are away with their families. But today we have the planning board to discuss two articles that are going to be upcoming at our town meeting. One is our floodplain, which we've discussed previously with them. And secondly is the East Milton overlay. So those are the two things we're going to discuss with a focus on the overlay. That's really what we're going to do today. So thank you everybody for being here. Karen, could you call the roll?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Lori Connolly. On Zoom we have Jay Fundling, Allison Gagnon, Julie Joyce, Macy Lee is here, Brian McGuire is here, and on Zoom we have Aman Nagasi and Judy Steele. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Karen. So as I mentioned very briefly, we discussed the floodplain with you in your previous trip here. We know that this is obviously a requirement, but this is more of a typical housekeeping for in terms of the establishment of an overlay district pursuant to Chapter 275 of the general bylaws for our zoning bylaws. So does anybody here present or online have any questions concerning the floodplain Article 4 that the planning board is putting forward? Okay, and those were forwarded to members of the Warrant Committee. So there was some slight changes with some red lines, but if no one has any questions, we can move on to the East Milton overlay.
Great.
And we have Meredith Hall, the chair of our planning board, and member Jim Davis here to discuss with us. So all that being said, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. This is an article that has been many years in the making. This is started with a tremendous amount of study to the East Milton neighborhood and what a mixed-use overlay zoning might look like. We did, I would say the greatest part about this is it's really been a very proactive involvement of the neighborhoods, the East Milton neighborhood district and the rest of the town. This has been something East Milton has been wanting and asking for, but they've wanted it to be done in a thoughtful way that not only allows for mixed use, a commercial with multifamily housing, but they wanted it to be done in a very thoughtful way. So surveys, public forums, there's been a lot of public process that has led up to this. So we're pleased to present this. And for those who have not been able to watch it, there was a forum that was held that is online for anyone who would like to watch, which walks through the entire process and sort of the history of how we got to this point. And it was very well received by the East Milton Neighborhood Association. So here we are this evening for an article to be presented for the June 16th town meeting. And just to begin, I think it's good to start with what the purpose is of this article. And it is section 275-322 East Milton Square Mixed Use Overlay District. This section's purpose is to allow high quality mixed use development that enhances East Milton Square. Successful mixed use development shall strengthen the walkability and safe and convenient circulation for all travel in East Milton Square, proactively and intentionally guide commercial district investment, enhance sense of place and district identity, leverage private investments to add community amenities while reducing impacts, encourage mixed-use development and increase a variety of housing options, improve environmental sustainability and resilience in the district, preserve and enhance the historic character of East Milton. The allowed uses in the area are mixed-use development. Mixed-use development is required with non-residential and residential uses. So as you know, East Milton is currently a commercial district. So when we're talking about an overlay zoning, it's important to remember for those who are watching and listening that underlying zoning always will exist. That's always going to be there. If somebody wants to continue to maintain a funeral home, a gas station, certain things that would not be allowed under this new overlay zoning, they are absolutely entitled to remain as that existing 100% commercial building. It's only new development within this district that if they wanted to take advantage of the overlay, that they would apply under this overlay zoning. So it allows another level of mixed use, residential, that could be added to the commercial district. So non-residential uses, all business uses otherwise permissible in the East Milton Square Business District shall be allowed by right with site plan review, except for drive-through, as I mentioned, drive-through food service facilities, filling stations, garages, sales rooms, and repair shops for motor vehicles, storage warehouses, and undertakers, which would be prohibited if they were taking advantage of this mixed use. Residential uses. Residential use shall be allowed by right with site plan review in conjunction with one or more non-residential uses identified in section BB. The permissible residential uses shall be multifamily housing, which is defined as having more than one housing unit in a building or multiple buildings on a lot. A housing unit is defined as that portion of a building providing complete housekeeping and cooking facilities for one family, as defined in section 275-11. This is important. The ground floor use. At least 50% of the usable ground floor area of the building must be designed for and occupied by non-residential uses, identified in section BB. Where possible, this area should be designed to accommodate individual businesses of 1,500 square feet or less. As used in the section 275-322, the ground floor shall be the story directly above the basement. If there is no basement, the story directly above the foundation, which generally coincides with the elevation of the adjacent sidewalk at the frontage of the building. Under the dimensional requirements, this is where we have our setbacks, side yard setbacks, rear setbacks, and then going on to building height. You can read, the front yard setbacks. We tried to really align with what is currently existing. So those setbacks would be the primary footage of new buildings and new additions to existing buildings shall be located no less than 0 feet and no more than 10 feet from the lot line. So this blends in with the character of what is already there. Side yard setbacks are not required when the abutting use is an existing business or mixed use. When the abutting use is an existing residential use, the minimum side yard setback is 10 feet. And then there's rear yard setbacks. The minimum rear yard setback is 12 feet when the abutting use is an existing business or mixed use. When the abutting use is an existing residential use only, the minimum rear yard setback is 20 feet. What was really important when we were putting out our survey and we were really listening to the residents and what people wanted, one of the things that most spoke out on is the height of the buildings. They wanted it to be mixed use. They wanted to maintain a commercial base, bringing in new revitalization, but they really were concerned about the height. So we've taken the direction from the feedback that we received. The maximum height, no building shall be erected or altered to exceed 3 stories or 45 feet in height. And then we go on to provide the definitions just to be clear for a developer or a builder what a story means. And that's slightly technical, so I'll let you just sort of look through that piece. Ground story height. Yeah, if there's questions at any point, this might be a good place to, and I'll just say open space was also important because we wanted to allow for some common areas, to allow for some setbacks so we could have maybe public benches, doing things that you would have tables, maybe outside, if there was maybe food being served on the first floor, but having really encouraging gathering places in a safe space, just to, again, revitalize that area. And so open space was part of what we were asking. And I will just read that. All properties must provide a minimum of 10% open space. Minimum open space may include hardscape, pedestrian piazzas, extensions of the sidewalk, public realm, planting of trees, pocket parks, balconies, roof decks, or off-site improvements to existing open space amenities. So
Thank you,
we can
Meredith.
pause at this point and see if there's any questions.
Oh, yeah, and I just put it out to our friends at home online. If anyone has any questions, just in regards to the first 3 pages, there's Chair Hall has covered A, B, C, up to this point.
Jay has his hand up.
Jay Funling, question.
Good evening.
Hey, Jay. So while Jay, we're trying to figure out the technical, I just have a very quick question. The 1,500 square feet or less, are we trying to encourage more smaller businesses or what?
Yes. So we're trying to keep it more of a village feel where you assemble a lot of small. We're hoping to guide sort of either startup businesses, unique businesses, not necessarily large commercial chain stores coming in. So that was part of our. It's a suggestion that we would like to see that some smaller businesses come in and support our small business community.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Jay, are you ready to ask your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I had technical problems.
No worries.
My question was no surprise, a little bit of nitpicking on wording. When you said that 50% of the ground floor must be designed for, and I'm trying to read the wording, designed for and occupied by non-residential uses. I just want to make sure that was the correct, I think we all know what that means, but obviously space can sit unoccupied. It can be designed for commercial, but they haven't found a renter yet, or they're between renters. We all know what that means, but is saying that it must be occupied by non-commercial space the right way to say it?
Maybe. What?
It's D.
D.
B, big B,
D.
small d.
Page, yeah.
I'm sorry, back here. Yeah, so this is at least 50% of the usable ground floor area of the building must be designed for and occupied by non-residential uses. So this is, the purpose for this is we don't want to lose our commercial base in East Milton. That's critical that we preserve it. So, and if somebody is building a new building, we don't want it to be all residential, all multifamily residential. We want to keep the commercial feel, and so a minimum of 50% on the first floor. So you can have you can put a residential unit. It's become more profitable for developers to do residential than commercial has become a little bit harder. So this is, does that?
I think my question was even more nitpicky than that. I get that they're not apartments. They're commercial space. What I'm saying is it says they must be occupied. What if they're sitting empty for some amount of time? I think the answer is that's fine, but should we not say that it has to be occupied?
It's designed for and occupy. So once somebody moves in, it would need to be a non-residential use. The tenant, it can be designed for, it needs to not only be designed for commercial, but it needs to be a commercial occupant.
I think the word by after occupied satisfies that, the way I read it. Designed for and occupied by non-residential uses.
Jay, I think are you talking tense here? Like it shall be occupied? Like, is that what?
Yeah, like what if it's sitting empty? What if they haven't found someone to rent it yet? Then it's not occupied.
So you don't like the word
And
must, and you want shall instead?
how-
The area of the building shall be designed.
I mean, that's the only thing,
But
if we're looking to change. Jay, is that,
Yeah, what's the recommendation, Jay?
Sorry, I don't have a recommendation.
Designed for and occupied by non-residential uses.
Are you concerned
And
that
I think,
they'll build it and then they won't get a tenant and it'll be a year without?
And then it'll be a violation of.
yeah, it's
then
like,
are they violating the rules because that's not occupied? I mean, it's very nitpicky, and I'll drop it after this go around. I just wanted to raise it.
Yeah, I mean, we may be designed for a non-residential use and just take out.
can I have a
But,
suggestion?
yeah.
I have a suggestion. Jay, how would this work? So if it says at least 50% of the usable ground floor area of the building must be designed for and shall be occupied, because you want to keep the 50% as mandatory. And then the
Right.
occupation somewhat discretionary, which is what shall implies, so you can split it, the baby that way. Right, what do you think?
yeah, I think the shall,
Insert shall be occupied.
yeah.
But keep the must, because you want to keep that.
Right, must be
want-
designed
you don't
for
want that
and shall be
subject.
occupied.
So Jay, thank you, and I think that does make it clearer. Now, as we've all
Yeah.
seen before in front of the planning board,
Right.
you're gonna have to vote on that language change,
Right,
and then it's gonna have to come
Right.
back to us.
so let's look at that. And we also like to run it by legal counsel too.
Of course.
Because they might have, but I
So
think that's good.
we'll note that little shall in paragraph B, D. I also had another Scrivener thing on
Yep.
section C, residential uses. It says uses identified in section B, and then you have the little b. Should you put the little b in parens?
Oh, section C.
That's in section BC, residential
BC.
uses
The little, I don't know.
in parens.
The only problem, that is the subsection's not in
The
parentheses.
subsection's
So
not
you do a
parens.
dot,
And that's
B
right.
dot. That's,
Yeah, okay,
Citing.
so strike that.
Okay,
No, I appreciate it. I just-
reading regs all day long.
that's good.
Oh, can I ask another question?
Sure,
Which is,
Jay.
Yeah.
less nitpicky. Sorry, I just realized this was this part of the document. So in BB, when you say, here are things we won't allow: drive-through fast food, gas stations, car dealerships, I guess. A lot of these make sense to me. The one that leaps out at me is where you say undertakers. And that, when I read that, that concerned me, because my first thought was, is that there? And I hope you take this in the right way. When I heard that, I was concerned that there are at least 2 undertaker businesses in the East Milton area. And did those business interests play into writing this so that they wouldn't get competition? I'm sorry if
Yeah.
this is coming across in the wrong way. I'm just saying that's what one might think when one reads this, and I want reassurance.
No, that's not, definitely not at all.
No
I can
takers
assure that.
approached me. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So can you speak to why? I mean, I get why we're not allowing.
This was our
McDonald's to drive-
consultant. This was a recommendation because this is when he's writing zoning for an area that is, that's going to be more of a mixed use area. That these are typical businesses that you don't want to add more of because you want the new development to come in to be commercial but have a residential component. So,
Yeah, and it does make sense. I mean, I've never seen an undertaker business on the first floor of an apartment building. That would be weird. But yet, when I saw, I guess it was a consultant doing the presentation, he specifically said, we're going to eliminate some of these businesses. You already have plenty of that in East Milton. And that got my spidey sense tingling. I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound good.
yeah, we want to keep the businesses that we have, obviously, that the wonderful, obviously undertakers and gas stations that we rely on. We just don't want it to all become all gas stations, all undertakers. We don't necessarily want more of that. And we've always had, drive-through food services have always been sort of prohibited. But there, in some of the previous zoning is a much older underlying zoning. So some of these uses are allowed for. So this is just clarifying that under this, they wouldn't be allowed to have additional.
Yeah, I guess if you could just have a reason as to why undertakers aren't allowed, I think that would give reassurance to me and to the other people on town meeting. Because
So,
Yeah.
real quick, I think we're just trying to encourage residential,
Resident, yeah.
residents to be able to walk around East Milton Square and go to a variety of different types of businesses. A funeral parlor is open during funerals and that's about it. And they would take up a lot of space. We're not trying to push them out. We're just saying if that came in, it wouldn't be detrimental, but it just wouldn't be more welcoming. I mean, I think of like maybe another women's boutique or a men's clothing store or, I don't know.
Amenities. I think we're
Yeah.
looking to add amenities to the area. It's a small area, a small district. So adding amenities, services for the community was our goal.
I see these too. I see these as very unique type of businesses that require like permitting and state approval and licensure. I see gas stations, food service facilities, garages, repair shops, a warehouse, and undertakers have their own statutory requirements. So it's not like a men's clothes store or like a 5 and 10 or a sub shop. It's a little more.
Right.
But I understand, Jay, and I appreciate you mentioning that.
And walkability, I think, for amenities was definitely something that we heard loud and clear. People want safe pedestrian, but they want to be able to walk and do all their errands and not have to get into a car. So when you have other businesses that you can't really run your errands, to a CVS, these would be really not considered necessary, although they're critical to a community, not the amenities in this particular location. If that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying, but there are lots and lots of businesses that people don't want to walk in and walk into. I could hang out a shingle and be a for-hire actuary, or someone could open a tax accounting firm, and that's not something you want to walk into, and yet we're not forbidding that. We're specifically forbidding undertakers. Now, what Tom said about the different types of regulations makes some sense. But when we're singling out specific ones and saying they can't be here, it gives me pause and makes me want to have a really good reason. Again, we're not listing tax accountants as somebody who can't open a shop just because they're not fun places to visit.
Well, I think you could walk to your tax. Like I would walk
Yeah.
to do my taxes if
And
I
you
could.
can.
And
They're
you
out
can.
there in East Milton too.
Yeah, an insurance broker, you could walk and.
I mean, we could,
So
we can nitpick. With a funeral home, it's like, what is it, open from 4 to 7 on every other Tuesday? I mean, that doesn't help the community.
That's the
I
thing.
would
How's
think.
that
I mean, it does in a sense. I saw
and we
anti-funeral
want to
home.
keep our.
But like, I know what you're saying. You're saying businesses that people can walk to in a regular commerce type of situation, buy something.
You want to keep it more lively downtown.
Right.
Good one.
Plus, if they
Good one. Save that for town meeting.
Can I have a?
Sure, of course.
So,
Yeah.
so just in response to Jay's comments, my understanding of this article is that the intent behind it is to have mixed residential and business use. So meaning, I'm just making an example, I'm envisioning the South End, for example, right? So
Right.
you have a 3-story building, you have 2 residential units on top and a business below. And a funeral home, as Jay just mentioned, is not really a place where you envision having a resident on top. Neither is a gas station, repair shop. So I think, and I may be inferring intent behind this article, is that going forward with this particular article, you're looking for mixed residential business use.
Right.
And so I think that the reason undertakers, automobile showrooms on Route 1, those are not what we envisioned because you wouldn't have that as a mixed residential business use. Am I correct in
Yes,
that? Okay,
that's
so I think that, so with the exception of the 2 funeral homes that are already in East Milton Square, going forward, you're looking for a mixed use. And that's not what these businesses would you envision as a mixed use. It would be boutiques, hair salons, maybe a cafe where you could have 2 units above the building, right? Am I right? So
that's what
so
we're
yeah,
hoping.
so Jay, so I'm just, like I said, in response to your comment, I think that that's why these particular businesses were mentioned behind this article, because they're typically not the type of businesses that would be involved with a mixed residential and business use. Does that make sense? It does make sense. Okay, so anyway, that's how I read this
That's
particular
correct.
article.
And this is also, I should say, this is very similar to what we did. A lot of this language was language that was lifted and used when we did the Lower Mills, Milton Village overlay zoning. So a lot of this mirrors that, which were similar, similar things that we addressed in there and design guidelines and standards, so.
Makes sense.
Do you think that there will be a push to force out the businesses that are on the second floor of some of those buildings with this overlay? Like, where are we going to lose business now, potentially? And are we concerned?
Yeah, I mean, it's the owner who will determine that, and a lot of those upper level, there's a lot of vacancies right now in some of those upper levels. I know a few that are they're trying to rent out, and it's nice to be able to offer that, but it would be up to the property owner to determine that.
But could they have a business on the second floor if they wanted?
Oh yeah, they can keep those businesses. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Well, if it currently exists,
Yeah.
it can all stay. Yes,
Okay.
it can be all commercial. This is more incentive for new construction, new development.
And where would that go?
So, well, had we had this in place when 440 Granite, when they were applying, this could have made that a different project where you would have had not only commercial, but the height would have been, limited. If you look all along that corridor, whether something will happen with Citizens Bank at some point, they have a huge parking lot there. It's massive. They don't actually own, Citizens Bank doesn't own that site. It's actually, they lease that property. So there's a few properties, and as you continue down towards the East Milton Fire Station, there's a few properties along there, and then some on Adams Street that we can see potential. So, and then as you continue down, we're including the fruit center property with this. That was sort of a question on whether we should include that or not, but in the end, we decided that should be as part of the map. To include that for mixed use, to allow residential if ever there was a change. But
That's interesting.
And the hope is that a developer looks at this and says, this is something that I can work with, and they won't go the 40B route. That's really one of the goals here.
right,
Because that was the threat with 440. We were seeing that with Falcone. We're trying to avoid those types of just massive developments.
right,
Preventive, okay.
preventive.
Makes sense.
Yes.
That's prevent, yeah.
Okay, if no one has any further questions on A, B, and C.
I have one more.
Oh, sure, Lori?
So the front yard setback,
Oh, good question.
primary frontage of new buildings and new additions shall be located no less than 0 feet and no more than 10 feet from the lot line. Is that does that include the sidewalk? So it can be basically on the sidewalk?
From the sidewalk, so it would be, yes, it should be,
Well, that allows you to build right up to the sidewalk, but we can't take over the sidewalk.
right,
But you could have
absolutely
a
not,
building
yes.
with a wall at the sidewalk?
So
Yes, most of them are like that right now. I mean, if you walk by Abbey
actually.
Park.
we're trying to
You're
make
right,
it
okay.
consistent with what's
I see
actually there.
that, okay.
So we didn't want it to be too, we wanted it to have
The same floor,
the same,
facade.
yes,
I
the same
gotcha.
storefront appearance that would be sort
I got
of
you.
somewhat consistent.
Yeah, all right, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
I was envisioning it
Which is
differently.
different because we typically ask for more of a setback, we want
Right.
open space, but, and when we get to the end, waivers can be granted too on this. So if it makes sense for the project, it can be looked at.
Okay, anybody have any further questions on A, B, or C?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
The open space, that includes open space in front, like what I see for Starbucks, or it could be in the back?
So that can be, we're flexible on that. So hardscapes with pedestrians, it could be a little, it could be like a little open, like Novara has a little courtyard area, outside seating area. It could be on the side, so it depends on where the property is, maybe in the back area, but it also could be along the front as well.
Okay, great.
If appropriate, but extensions to the sidewalks, we're thinking of again, a planting, we'd love to see planting beds done out front, some green space added to it. Sometimes you see planters done out front in the property and things that would enhance the sort of the look and feel of the site.
Would you know if the 10% of that Navarre's, is that covered by the 10% little thing?
So that was pre-existing, so that was under a
Right.
different, and that was a special permit all unto itself. So I don't know
Probably
that that
not.
was a requirement.
It's probably not 10%. Like if a new person bought it,
Yes.
would they
right.
fall into the grandfather piece, or do
They would be grandfathered under what currently exists there. So this would be for new development or
Gotcha.
additions to properties and changes to
Okay.
new
Yeah, all
sites.
the existing zoning, special permits, everything stays in place. This is an
Yeah.
option for property owners.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's
Take
a
it
new
to the next level
incentive
if they
for
want to.
Yeah.
new commercial and residential revitalization, which hopefully translates into improved tax bases. So.
New growth.
New growth. And a smart new growth, yes.
We say Milton.
Yeah.
Okay, are we good on those first three sections? Okay, so now we have D, and just starting
Yep.
off with historic preservation, one of the Warrant Committee's favorite topics.
So we did move to, yes, with historic preservation, it was really important to our members when we were looking at this. There's some beautiful historic buildings that front Granite Avenue, that wrap around where Abbey Park and Navarre, some really beautiful classic buildings that we wanted to protect. Some have been altered significantly, so we did say that buildings constructed in whole or substantial part before 1940 shall be preserved as part of an adaptive reuse mixed-use redevelopment. The purpose would be the preservation of buildings of historic significance and expansion of the economic options for historic properties in East Milton. So say one day the post office was decided to sell. We wanted our historic buildings to have a purpose and to be able to maintain those buildings, but find a new use. We went on with definitions, which you can look through, shall include preservation or restoration of buildings exterior, and may include renovation, rehab, restoration, or recreation of features or elements of the building. The exterior elements of a building shall be historically compatible and appropriate to the preserved historic structure. And then we gave some guidance on what we would like for that to look like. Then it goes through, if somebody wants to, if notwithstanding the foregoing, a building constructed before 1940 need not be preserved if the planning board, after seeking the advice of the historical commission, determines that the building lacks substantial architectural significance and is not historically important, or that the building is in an advanced stage of deterioration and not able to be preserved at a reasonable financial cost. We would allow, there are a lot of, many buildings are surveyed. Many have been altered significantly and now have aluminum siding or vinyl siding or just don't have any significance. That would not be maintained. But if a building of significance and they wanted to do an improvement, we want to make sure that those buildings don't get torn down. We didn't want to be this, we didn't want this article to become something that people just came in and we're just going to level everything in East Milton and rebuild all new. And it's unrecognizable. We wanted it to be recognizable and protect the village feel. And so they can put additions on for some of the single story buildings. They can add on, but it has to be compatible with the existing. We would want it to be compatible with the existing building. So it's incentivizing additions. They can go up to 3 stories, but we're going to try to hold on to the beautiful buildings that we have and not have just a demolition, incentive for demolition. So that's was important.
I think the post office is a great example.
Yeah, those were, and even the Milton Arts Center. Like people love the Milton Arts Center. Somebody could come in and, and we even thought, maybe somebody one day, if the post office was ever sold, which we hope it wouldn't be, but there's land behind it where they could even do new housing, maybe do townhomes behind that or add some, sort of mixed use on the property as well, but or add an addition to the back and do some sort of residential mixed use in that. Keep commercial in the front, residential maybe. So we wanted to
Cute
offer.
restaurant.
Yeah, what?
Be a cute
The
restaurant.
rest of the post office?
Yeah.
Would be amazing.
That's-
Maybe like
Yeah,
that
so-
Masonic Lodge.
And,
The Masonic Lodge in Quincy.
With that
They
beautiful
made it
mural.
big, yeah.
Right?
and even the
That's cool.
East Milton Fire Station, like what is the potential of what that could be? You know,
I
it
don't
could
know,
be-
but we can't sell it.
right,
We
right,
must keep it.
yeah, and we can, right, and we can do some interesting. I think there's potential to do some interesting things. So, and maintaining the building, which folks love. So, if deemed historically important, this is part of the approval. Project approval may require the restoration, rehab, renovation, repair, adaptive reuse, or addition to historic structures in the district. In order to grant project approval, the proposed restoration, rehab, renovation, repair, adaptive reuse, or addition shall preserve to the maximum extent feasible the historic and architectural features of the building or structure element.
So this will,
yeah.
I'm sorry, this,
Yeah.
just to clarify, this will protect the fire station for now, right?
The fire station is actually a town-owned building, so the municipal buildings are not necessarily.
They're not covered by this?
Unless if they sold it and demolished it. I believe that municipal buildings would be exempt unless they sold to a new owner. So,
But once they sold it, it would be covered by this,
yes, correct.
right?
That is
Okay.
correct.
If
Yes.
we're selling it.
If.
Right.
Well, that's,
So if the-
it won't get sold.
So yeah, the Milton Arts Center, the same,
Better not.
but if it changed hands with a
Yes.
new, and they wanted to change that use.
Could I ask you a question? It's just about the approval, and I think we all know it kind of when we see it, but if deemed historically important, would you, as the planning board, suggest the historical commission to look at it?
We would
I
send
think-
it to the historical commission for their comment.
Okay.
Yeah. And that would sort of be the determination, a yay or nay on that. And then waivers at the discretion of the planning board through site plan review, relief from the dimensional, as we mentioned, or parking requirements may be granted for good cause to accommodate the preservation of a historic structure and property. So that would be something that would be allowed.
What would be a good cause? I'm just kind of thinking, what would, just like, if you were,
So say the fire station,
okay.
I was just going to use that because there's really no area for parking on
three
that
spots.
site, 3 spots. But if there was a great use that they could justify, either maybe they would be leasing a parking lot from Citizens Bank, or they would say, we don't have parking here, but we're gonna rent parking, or maybe the hours of operation would be conducive to street parking that would be allowed for minimum hours. So so we would have to look at that very carefully with East Milton because parking is an issue.
No, I appreciate it. That's,
Yeah.
no, it's a good idea, I
Yeah.
think, given some of the structures, so
Yeah.
thank you.
And we're trying to encourage parking, properties that have large parking areas that maybe they find shared uses. So for Abbey Park, Novara, that they don't have adequate parking, maybe they go in with one of the banks or a funeral home, and they have a shared lease where they're able to keep their business running, but find alternative uses that may need parking at different times of the day. So that's creative alternatives for parking.
Perfect, thank you.
So just continue with E, design standards. We really wanted, the goal was to, in incentivizing development, we wanted to really protect the character. So each building and site shall be designed to positively contribute to the legacy and character of East Milton Square while enhancing livability for surrounding residents. The building design and site layout shall define street frontage by occupying street edges with an active ground floor and filling gaps between existing buildings. The building design and site layout shall shall configure the building layout and building massing to shape outdoor spaces by placing buildings at the edges of the outdoor space and located at active ground use floor uses. The transparent ground floor facades at these locations The building design and site layout shall also be used to define street edges, corners, and intersections. Site layouts shall consolidate and share off-street parking efficiently across lot lines, improve streetscapes and walkability by minimizing curb cuts, and contribute to livability through the creation of pocket parks, additional outdoor spaces, and new outdoor amenities. The architectural design shall be composed to be visually attractive and compatible with the context of the East Milton Square Business District and nearby buildings. So, and then it just comes with some context sensitive and yeah.
Meredith,
Yeah.
okay, what's a pocket park?
It would be a small little, there can be different size pocket parks. So you might call, is it Cranefield in East?
Is that like?
Is a pocket park.
Is that Belcher's?
Belcher Circle, yes, that would be considered a pocket park. But you could have smaller pocket parks where it could be like a little garden sitting out area. It almost Navarra could be considered, that be a little outdoor space that you can, and it could be a little play area. We could, maybe somebody might design something that might be active for children to activate, to use. But there tend to be little small parks. Spalding Garden is a pocket park, if you know off of Fletcher Steel. It's just a little within a residential neighborhood. The best pocket parks I can think of are in the South End.
Yeah, or Bay Village.
Exactly. So in the South End, where you don't even know that they're there, and you walk through the building, and then you walk outdoor in the back, and they might have a little park out back.
Gotcha, okay.
Would be a great use where you could sit out and have for the residents as well as the businesses. So
Thank you.
good.
Meredith, can I ask a
Yeah.
quick question, Jim? The second sentence, the building design and site layout shall define street frontage by occupying street edges. Street edges. I'm kind of, what does that mean? What does that like phrase mean there? Like, what does it
So
say?
that might be, you might be doing things that define your street edges. So that might be brick. It might be like a, down in Central Ave.
I understand.
You do
now. Okay.
like a brick, just a thin, narrow brick strip that sets your sidewalks. It gives them character. Sometimes people brick over the whole sidewalks, but sometimes they just do an edging. And Central Avenue, that's an example along Elliott where that was done. It's a nice detail.
Yes.
Along with, the street trees. Sometimes they frame the trees with brick edges, but just gives maybe granite curbing that obviously, something that would enhance that. We're encouraging utilities to be put underground when possible. Sure. So for 40 Granite, we're hoping that they can work with the town and the utility companies and sync those. It would make a tremendous amount of difference when you drive in and you don't have telephone pole after telephone pole. So sort of improving the streetscape there that way.
I'll be honest, I thought it was a schematic. Brick is lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Just want to break up that massive concrete.
Yeah, no, it makes
Right.
sense.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so people could do, there could be different things like a granite bench. So, if you think about, again, down on Central Avenue, there were some nice granite stone markings and benches and bollards that you can do. There's a lot of things that you can do to enhance that streetscape. So we're really encouraging that in East Milton to really warm that up and make a welcoming, inviting center. Okay, historical context, these are all.
Does anybody watching have any questions just as to historical D&E? If there are no questions, please Meredith and Jimmy can move on. I know.
Yeah, we'll go through these, and you can read through these, and if there's any questions on these, to reach out. Again, this is mostly a lot of the same language that we have in the overlay zoning from Milton Village. So changes to design, impact parking, again, just good, thoughtful design features. Sign approval, that will go through the sign review process that the town has. So that's provided in 275-33. We, have the opportunity to make some recommendations on what type of signage will go in, avoiding internally lit signs, for example, like Santander. Like we will be able to, through site plan review, make recommendations, but ultimately it'll go through the sign review committee. This is something I think that's important to point out. Affordable housing units. In the East Milton Square mixed use overlay, it'll be 12% of the total housing units for a project with less than 25 units, or 15% of the total housing units for a project with 25 units or more, computed to the nearest whole number, shall be affordable housing units subject to perpetual deed restrictions, and if applicable, a regulatory agreement ensuring permanent affordability. And so I think that will be something that will help us, again, with our affordable housing units. And it goes into more detail of calculation on, should the calculation result in a remainder of 0.5 or above, an additional on-site unit shall be required. Should the remainder be below 0.5, a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust shall be required in an amount to be determined by the planning board. These units shall be affordable to households whose annual income shall not exceed 80% than the current area median income AMI for the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy, Mass. Metro FMR area as determined by the U.S. Department of Housing. And then all affordable units shall be integrated with and distributed throughout the development and shall be comparable in size, in design, floor area, number of bedrooms, appearance, construction, and quality of materials with market rate units. And to the maximum extent possible, preference shall be given to Milton residents and employees of the town of Milton in the rental or purchase of affordable units. A site plan approval issued under this section shall state that final occupancy permits shall not be issued until the affordable housing restrictions, and if applicable, the regulatory agreements have been agreed to with the Registry of Deeds, and copies of the recorded documents have been provided to the planning board and the building commissioner. So that was, we felt was really important to include in that. Any questions? On that?
Yeah, I don't remember that. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'll just jump in, but how do you manage that? The preference should be given to Milton residents and employees in the town of Milton. Like how can
So
you
they would do, so they have to go through, there's a lottery process when any of the developments, like Hendry's was the most recent, they run it through, and I think they typically, they contract that out to an agency who does that. And so Hendry's didn't actually do the lottery themselves. Mm-hmm. Another agency did, and they have the list of
Milton residents
who apply.
I did not know that.
And
Okay.
to give a preference.
That's great.
So
How would you determine the amount that a developer would have to contribute to the Affordable Housing Trust?
So that would probably be calculated on their market rate rents. We would have to get advice probably from the Affordable Housing Trust on what would be an appropriate amount on that. Because obviously it would have to be a reasonable amount.
And
Sometimes they do in lieu of a unit, they will agree
Give
to
money.
a certain amount.
And you say you're going to be looking at the market rate? rentals?
Market rate, it will be, usually, typically there's a market rate, a certain percentage. But we would probably consult with the Affordable Housing Trust too on that.
Yeah.
But sometimes that it's negotiated back, if it's
It's part of the permitting.
right, to come to some sort of agreement on that.
I just want to make
As
sure we
just-
get enough.
Yeah. right. No, it's all very.
Don't want to
important.
get too much though, so we stall the project. It's a happy medium.
Well, that's true, but still,
Right,
let's set our
Not that I'm not all for it, just.
yeah. Parking, so this is very important in East Milton, business parking in the East Milton Square Mixed Use Overlay District, minimum parking requirements for businesses. Uses follow parking requirements in business districts 275-11.3, provided that upon a determination that a greater or lesser number of parking spaces would be reasonably necessary so as to be adequate for the business use in a particular project, the planning board may increase or decrease the number of business parking spaces required for the project. This is, again, this sort of ties back to things you've seen before. In the event of a restaurant use, at least one parking space shall be provided for each 4 patron seats, provided that upon an applicant showing that a lesser number of spaces would be adequate for the restaurant use, the planning board may reduce the required amount of parking. Resident parking, for the residential units, there shall be a minimum of 1 parking space for each residential unit. Off-street parking, safe and convenient parking may be provided off-site within or adjacent to the East Milton Square Business District for the parking required to support business uses at other properties. This is what I was talking about, that maybe they rent from Citizens Bank during the evening if they need additional parking, or other properties in East Milton Square Business District. Off-site spaces used to fulfill parking requirements shall be associated with a parking agreement between the applicant and the owner of the property where the off-site spaces are proposed to be located. The parking agreement shall be submitted as part of the application. Shared parking reductions, again, this is just ways to be creative if there's a site that we would need to address this. Off-street parking requirements may be reduced if they collectively serve different uses within the same mixed use development or collectively serve multiple uses across multiple sites, where such collective use of the parking facilities is based on a written agreement that assures the continued and collective use, states the number of parking spaces allocated to each participating use, and anticipated peak parking demand days and times for such uses, and that it assures access to and maintenance of the common parking facility counted towards the minimum required parking spaces approved by the planning board. Other reductions, a reduction in the calculated parking requirement may be allowed as deemed appropriate by the planning board through a special permit upon demonstration of the features of the project that reduces automobile dependence for the development. These features may include the provision of on-site dedicated parking space for car share vehicles, for example, increased bicycle parking, and amenities beyond the requirements of 275-1112, on-demand shuttle services, or other transportation demand management techniques, and shall be appropriately scaled to the scale of the development and requested reduction in parking. Bicycle parking applies to residential components of projects. Projects involving businesses shall also provide adequate exterior parking of bicycles for customers and employees. And then additional requirements. This goes on to the additional requirements. So that's a new section. So question on parking.
I have a question, Meredith.
Yeah.
Are residents allowed to apply for on-street parking, such as on Elliott Street? If there's so let's just say a unit requires more than 1 parking spot. There are 2 people or 2 cars. Will they be able to seek a street parking permit, like the cars that I see on Elliott Street?
They're currently, I don't believe that it goes through the police department, the hardship parking, so that we would not regulate that.
Okay.
There's been a lot of concern about how easily it's become to get overnight parking passes in some areas. Some areas it's appropriate, but again, when we're bringing in more residential, that would be good. That would go through the police department.
Okay. So there won't be any designated resident parking spaces
no.
in East Milton Square?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, Milton still does not allow overnight parking.
Okay. I see some cars on Elliott Street with the red sticker. This is Milton permit parking.
They have given some.
I've seen that when I was walking.
There.
I actually walked down there
Yeah.
last night, and I saw several cars on the street with the red sticker.
There's a few two families in that area, and they don't have one has a driveway, but most don't have a lot.
Those
you
are the
don't
ones
have
that are
driveways.
closest to the
Yeah.
Henry's building, right?
Yeah, the
Right.
ones that further going towards
Yeah, to the right of Milton Hill House.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you don't envision that happening in East Milton?
I don't. We really do hope that most provide on-site parking on there, and it would encourage them to do so.
Because I think the existing residences, the residents who live there are concerned with parking on their streets and blocking their driveways
Absolutely.
when using the businesses in East Milton.
Right. For sure. Yeah. No, it's a
Just, can I ask on that same question? I actually think that if they're a Milton resident, and they don't have a parking spot, I think they have to let them park overnight. 'Cause what
I
else
think
they-
so, I don't
think
know.
so.
I don't know, I just,
But I could be wrong about that.
I don't
But
know.
I've heard that, but it's anecdotal. But why don't they put, like, that's the biggest issue I have with this. Like, why, they say the average apartment in Boston area has 1.5 cars per unit. Why don't we just force that? Why don't we?
the 1.5.
Yeah, because like with the Falcone, for example, there's 45 cars based on that math that aren't going to have a home. Like,
Yeah.
why can't we force that?
We definitely used to be more stringent with that. In this case, we were trying to find a balance between revitalizing an area, preserving the existing structures, and trying to find alternative solutions for parking. So most developers, to make their apartments or condos marketable, need to provide ample parking. And so we've almost seen a reverse by developers who have, for example, in South Boston, a lot of developers were not putting in enough parking and their condos weren't selling. So we've almost seen developers saying, you know what, I'm going to spend all this money building this if I don't have enough parking for my residents and can't guarantee a parking spot. And I know that the buyers and the renters in Milton are going to want parking to be included. It's, if you're downsizing from your house, you're going to a condo, you're going to want parking. So it almost will somewhat self-regulate, but
But they
I
can
hear your
park on the
point.
street.
I hear your point.
Is the issue.
Yeah, I know. It's
So there's an alternative. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's going to become like Dorchester or the South End, where you're going to have residential parking and get a sticker, and you can never find a
Yeah.
parking spot.
right.
I think that's the future.
Well, yeah, we want to monitor that and yeah.
And for
consider
businesses, I think like, I get it for businesses, like Bruegger's doesn't need parking, I suppose. There's so much people walking from the neighborhood going to restaurants or,
Yeah.
but for residents, I would think you need it,
Right.
that piece.
Yeah, I know. It's something we discussed and yeah, ended up with at least one. But again, we would, 1.5. I think there was concern with if we required too much parking, it affects sometimes whether a development will happen or not. So the goal was to incentivize revitalization, but it's a balance. So I definitely hear you. Yeah.
And it was presented to us as, the younger generations aren't buying cars.
That's
So
not
people
true.
in their 20s and 30s. No, look, whether I agree with it or not, this is just an argument that was made
By the consultant?
by the consultant. Yeah.
He's consulting in the city then.
It's true. No, that's true.
Cambridge, Somerville,
Yeah.
Boston, but
It can be
not
something that, yeah, we can,
not in Quincy, Milton,
yeah.
But there's no
Dorchester.
MBTA in East
No,
Milton,
I
so
get it. I get
you
it.
have to, you know this.
Right.
I mean, unless you're teleworking all the time,
I
right?
mean, there's
Yeah,
just,
when you look outside your
Yeah,
window and
yeah.
there's a highway right there, you're
Yeah.
gonna wanna drive on it.
Right.
Just like the other end of Granite Ave, when people wake up, they see the highway, they're gonna wanna drive
We're
on it.
gonna
Correct.
get on
As opposed
in
to
the car and get on.
North Quincy
Right.
and taking a train
Yeah.
into.
You're not walking to Butler.
Yeah, right, right.
Right. So then it goes on for the application requirements, which again, this just clarifies for anyone who's applying what they would need to do. Shall include a plan meeting the requirements of the site plan specified in 275-12.4 and such other requirements as may be specified by the planning board. The plan shall be contained in various sheets, all of which, after approval, shall contain the written approval of the planning board and shall be recorded with Norfolk County deeds. So this, you all have become familiar with the site plan approval process and approval. Any relevant special permits shall also be recorded with the plan at the applicant's expense. The recorded plan shall be part of the site plan approval. The plan shall show the development in all material detail. Any amendments or modifications to the plan shall be approved by the planning board and recorded and filed with the registry at the applicant's expense. The applicant shall promptly provide the planning board evidence of recording of each approved plan, amendment, modification. The applicant shall promptly provide a copy of all recorded or filed documents to the planning board showing the book and page and document number. If applicable, the application involving a property on which there is a building constructed in or before 1940 shall be referred to the Milton Historical Commission for consideration of its historical and architectural significance and the desirability and feasibility of its preservation, rehabilitation, or restoration on the proposed development. After consideration, the Milton Historical Commission may issue a report which may include comments and suggestions to the planning board on these matters and any associated matters pertinent to the commissioner's responsibility, and the planning board shall consider any such report in its evaluation of the application. If applicable, an application involving a property on which there is a building constructed in or before 1940 shall include a narrative description compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards with the application materials. The application shall include a narrative prepared by the project architect describing the project relative to the historic context of East Milton Square, including a statement of the positive contributions of the project that make the character of East Milton Square Business District by preserving its history and strengthening its streetscape and vitality. The applications shall include professional studies calculating the impact of the development on the town services, on the parking of the East Milton Square Business District and adjacent neighborhood streets, on traffic in the district and surrounding areas of the town, on existing nearby businesses, and on future business development. If there's no material adverse project impact projected, mitigating strategies shall, if there is material adverse impact, mitigating strategies shall be proposed. The applicant shall include a narrative describing the parking, ride sharing, bicycle storage, and other similar transportation infrastructure elements integrated with the project. In the event of restaurant use, at least one parking space shall be provided for each. Let's go back to that page. For the project. The narrative shall include discussion of off-site transportation impacts, including a district parking impact analysis and traffic impact analysis for the proposed project. The narrative shall describe potential district mitigation that may be proposed to address the impacts identified. The applicant shall include a narrative describing compliance with the design standards. The application shall include architectural renderings, building elevations, an existing conditions survey with structures, retaining walls, parking areas, trees, topography, existing condition photos, and site and adjacent properties. Proposed site plan with structures, retaining walls, parking areas, topography, landscape plan and details, site plan sections with accurate topographic depiction, building materials, specification, and other pertinent details regarding the project, architecture, and site plan. And then again, the review fees, this is all sort of just standard for that application process. And that is and notice and procedural requirements set out in 275-13.2 and 275-3, and the standard to be used in rendering a decision, which these are all for site plan review for mixed-use development under this section. So this also has its own site plan under, because that was probably a question.
Yeah.
So this is like the AD, if you can think about it like the ADU. This is its own world, it's its own site plan process. So the site plan that it's accountable is what is in this document only.
Okay.
So most of it is what exists in the new document, but it's with what is contained in here that are the only requirements for this overlay zoning.
Could I ask
Specific, yeah.
just some like specific stuff? I'm just on section C of application requirements, section IC. What are the Secretary of the Interior standards?
So it's a commonly used term for historic preservation projects. So when Walcott Woods was being built on Upper Canton Avenue, a lot of those were historic structures. So there's certain standards that they want you to adhere to. It does not necessarily mean you can't replace windows, you can't do but it needs to be a certain level that is appropriate for a historic site. So it's very specific language that's laid out. And most
But not like a hyperized version of it, but it's just like
it's certain standards of quality and consistency with materials and with things that exist. And again, waivers can always be granted. For example, Walcott Woods, they came to us on certain things and wanted a slate roof to be changed to an asphalt roof for certain reasons. And we don't have any slate roofs. We don't have anything to that level. But really for mostly facades, that window alterations would be consistent with, if they're changing out windows, that they would be consistent with the existing windows.
And I just have one more question. This goes to the end of the document, so I'm kind of skipping. I'm just skipping to the J, section J, application review fees. And it was just, the planning board may require that an applicant pay a review fee, reasonable costs for employment of consultants. Is there any examples you can give of that, that you would think it would be applicable if this is passed? Like, just an example.
So the typical review fees are engineering. So an engineer would have to evaluate a site for drainage systems, for example. Traffic would be another example that we would ask. We've never asked for an architectural review of a property. It's typically been civil engineering, which are the fees to make sure that its site can. And sometimes a consultant's brought in for construction management to set up, but more it's for civil engineering.
And just a follow, when does that become? I don't know. I'm kind of like, again, I'm
very early. Like once they come to us, and what usually triggers it is not only just through the planning department, but when it goes through the building department, it will get triggered by the engineering department. It will get kicked to the engineering department. So there's multiple people looking at this. So often, the engineer peer review, or whether it's Conservation Commission, whatever they will ask for a civil engineering, a drainage report. And so because we're not engineers, that will be Marina Fernandez. Marina will be in her department, the engineering department, will actually review that. They'll write a comment letter, and they may go back to, after following that peer review, they'll go back and say that to the peer reviewer, they need more information, they need something else. So the applicant will be required to provide another level of some sort of engineering study. So that at that point, it tends to go back and forth between the town engineer, and then we will get a final letter of recommendation saying that it has met all the requirements. But sometimes it's asked by the Conservation Commission, sometimes it's asked by Marina, and then sometimes it's asked by the planning board for those reviews.
And the memory clinic comes to mind.
Yeah,
It was a
that's
very, very wet site.
And there was a ton of engineering and hydrology and just report after report. And I think it was Sean Reardon was our peer reviewer, and the guy was super helpful.
Sure. So like in a project like of that size, when do the costs become unreasonable? So like we're on the hook. So like just say hypothetically like this traffic study cost $1 million.
Yeah.
About that. Like
A lot of times there's an existing traffic study, which is often utilized for an existing traffic study in East Milton that is referred to. They'll have to do sometimes an additional traffic count to update that at certain times of the day. Maybe they have to look at, working with the town on signalization, for example. If it's I'm just thinking of East Milton Square, they have to have the signals set to allow the traffic to flow. So sometimes a traffic engineer will look at that, but it doesn't tend to be anything excessive. I think most developers, depending on the scale of it could be a small project, but if it's something larger and more significant, like 440 Granite, they know they have to have those studies done.
yeah, so it's like these are par for the course. I was just trying to think
They're very standard.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of a circumstance where the developer might be like, okay, like we can do 75% of that, but like we've never had to do that in any place in the world before. So can you pay for some of this planning board? Like, and I know that I'm just trying to think of a situation where it would be unreasonable. I'm just trying to think of an anticipated question.
Well, I think they're responsible for bringing the reports forward, and then we just review them.
Okay.
So I would imagine it's not, I can't say for certain, but I don't think costs would escalate because we're just reviewing their work.
Okay.
At least that's the way it was with the memory bank.
Yeah, well, that's one project that I would think, given the location of it, that there would be some like pretty intense studies just in terms of the geography of the land. So I guess that answers my question. I guess there really isn't. I can't foresee a project really much larger than that in Milton, frankly.
Right.
Yeah, and not as complicated as that one.
Okay, so thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Does anybody, I kind of monopolized it. Does anybody else have any questions in regards to the second half of of this article or the document as a whole? And that would include any comments anybody may have, especially those who are watching online may have on this article. There was also a very lengthy piece in the Milton Times about this, I can recall a couple of months ago.
Yes. And
But that was it was very.
Yeah, that was following the forum. And Josh Fiola from MAPC is our consultant, and he did a wonderful job. I think some of the warrant committee members were there and heard the presentation. There was a link sent to you. So I think if the warrant committee members would like to watch that, it really sort of walks through the history and all of the work that's been done to get into this. And it really was embraced by the East Milton Neighborhood Association, which for us was really important that they felt, because this is a big change, and change is not easy, as we all know, but this gave enough protection. So I think the residents who have been wanting to see something, this feels like that it's change, but with protections. And I think it's finding that balance, that we're looking for development opportunities, but we're protecting the neighborhood at the same time.
I'll speak for a little bit because I'm an East
Yeah.
Milton resident.
Yeah,
I've been to
yeah.
most of the meetings. And I know that the first iteration that MAPC came up with, nobody was happy with.
Right.
And I think people throw the planning board a lot of bombs at you. They get a lot of bombs thrown at you. But I think that everybody was very appreciative of the planning board for stepping up for the neighborhood and the community and making the changes that they did, because I think it's a great improvement over that. So I appreciate
We
that.
heard that feedback.
Yeah, most people, I did too, and I heard that, and I feel that too.
That was
So I'm
good.
really happy with it. Thank you. Great.
That's good.
Kudos.
That's good.
And the last 2 pages are all about the process, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And one thing that we heard was that residents wanted to see, with 440, they didn't know what they were getting and until the end. This allows a developer to come in and read this and say, okay, this is potentially what I can do. So everyone knows what to expect. So I think it's going to be super helpful from that angle also. Not just limiting the height from 5 stories to 3, but having a process that people can understand, developers understand.
You can't retro this to 440 though, right?
Unfortunately not.
I know.
Not without a time machine.
Such a sin.
I know.
You know, 440 will be all right because it's got road on two sides and then it's got the citizens parking lot. I mean, if there's a place for a monstrosity.
And hopefully we'll bring
That's-
some good commercial base and,
Yeah, but that
Residential.
didn't have a lot of space for commercial, did it?
yeah, not as much as.
It's getting off the express.
You know, when you think of New England, you know, New England town, like Milton's still a town, which I think people live here because it's a town and they like that,
Right.
not a city. So I like that we're preserving that. But like, when I think of a New England town, you see a church steeple.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And on my street, in my streets, like 440 is now blocking that church steeple that we used to be able to see for a lot of people.
Wow,
Yeah.
It will, which is sad.
yeah. I know.
So we gotta get to 10% affordable because the threat was 40B.
Yeah, right.
Everything we approved.
I see that.
Even with the memory clinic, everything backs up to, well, I'm gonna go 40B if you don't let me do this. At some point, you push the developer too far.
Yeah.
Until we get that 10% safe harbor.
But the minute you get the 10%, you
And the
you
ADU bylaw. Yeah, I get it.
add more, then we'll be chasing it for the rest of our lives.
We will. We will.
Be a challenge to get ahead.
ADUs considered, can they be considered affordable
No,
housing?
There's no affordable, unless you're the noble gentleman who builds an ADU and just, you know.
And
makes
it actually screws you because the mix, it probably goes the other way, right?
Yeah, because
It adds to our
ADU,
housing stock, our
Oh,
overall
right.
housing.
but that's up to the discretion of the owner, to whatever they
Yeah.
want to set.
Exactly.
So it's not, it doesn't have to be
Never
affordable.
gonna be.
Yeah.
so this is terrific. Any questions that we can answer, please feel free to email if anything comes up.
Can I just ask one other
yeah.
question? So the Fruit Center lot is residential. Is a
That's-
residential zone right now.
That, it's actually,
Is that-
the parking lot itself is more on the commercial side. It's sort of, it's a split, and the building where the actual structure, that's that's residential.
So the
The
first
residential
parking
piece.
lot is commercial.
Oh, and then up top, are you talking about the upper
The up
levels?
top is
Okay.
commercial. And then the parking lot down below where the building is?
Yeah,
is
that's
That's not,
commercial.
that-
That's part of that lot is commercial.
oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
But the backside that abuts to Franklin is? for the-
That's residential.
Including like the row of parking spaces along Franklin, is that residential?
Where you go to where that upper lot is, the upper municipal.
No,
town-owned.
I'm behind.
Where the
You go-
loading docks are.
Yes,
Oh, with
in
loading
the
docks.
back.
That's residential, I believe,
Okay,
too.
and so it's what's closer to Granite Ave.
You're right, the Granite Ave
Is,
side
okay,
is.
I got you. So that area will stay residential. What's residential is residential. And this overlay
Yes,
would allow that somebody, whether if he sold it
Mm-hmm.
or anybody else, to add
they could go up to 3
another
stories.
story.
They could go up to, add a story,
Okay.
and do retail on the first floor and residential up above.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Okay. Anybody else?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, just thank you.
And did you all receive the map? Because every time we do an overlay zoning, there's a map, and I'll make sure you all get it because it's basically Mechanic Street all the way up to the funeral home. But then it does cross over which includes the bank.
Citizens?
No, across,
The Justin building there? I call it the Justin building.
yes, where Heart
Rockland-
Dental,
Rockland
Rockland
Trust.
Trust,
Oh,
where Rockland
yes,
Trust
yes,
is.
yes.
And the
That's
post
also
office.
included, we included that. We didn't go too far out. We kept it a pretty tight boundary, mostly along Granite Street and then up to Franklin. So it's a pretty tight map, but I'll make sure you all see the map too. So it's,
Anything beyond the church, right? Or even before the church, it's not part of the overlay.
it's not part of
For
it.
the church.
Yeah, we really want, and even if a lot was split half, because it's interesting, a lot of lots, even like residential homes, sit half commercial, half residential. So we kept those residential for the most part.
So is the post office?
That's included in this.
Post office, Juvenil's building.
Yeah.
Juvenile.
Elliott Physical Therapy.
Yeah.
And I think it stops right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then across the street, it's.
Right.
Those used to be all single-family homes. The Sheldon Building,
Really?
the Dr. McDonald.
Oh, yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
those were all, a lot of history with the building of the expressway, why
Yeah.
those zoning areas were formed, how they were formed and why.
That's right, there's
Yeah.
that big
Really
white
interesting.
house,
How they have to
right?
be owner occupied.
Okay.
Also,
Really?
they still have to be.
Still,
owner
huh?
occupied. They're supposed to be, with the exception of the Sheldon, now Jeshen Building.
It's
It's
interesting.
really interesting
The
how
way it's
that all
evolved. Exactly.
like formed in that area.
Right.
Well, the train used to
might do
run by
that.
there. That was the
Yeah.
train depot, right? That-
I know,
yeah.
which would have been nice to have a little train there.
There was just one thing, I just
Yeah.
wanted to just reiterate Jay's point from the very early on, just
Yes.
about the shall
Yes.
and the must.
So we'll address that and just, I think that was,
Yeah, that was just the one thing I just wanted to, I just noted, there was just a couple of typos.
okay.
There was
What page is that?
one on page 8, paragraph E. Parking restrictions, just a space issue with on-site and the hyphen.
I'm
Page
sorry.
8, paragraph E.
Yeah. Just the.
Paragraph.
It's the middle of it. These features may include the provision of an
Site.
site.
I'm not
I'm
seeing
sorry,
an E in page 8.
Yeah, I'm not either.
E? Other
It
parking
is
restrictions?
Page 8.
H E.
Page 8. Oh, page
Oh,
9.
H.
Oh, I'm sorry. H.
Page 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of these
Sorry.
printed. So under E, other parking restrictions.
Yeah, it's just the word on-site with the space, and then
I'm sorry, could you
Where are
repeat
you,
that?
Tom?
Yeah.
it's the 4th line down, or the 5th line down. Other parking reductions.
The fourth one.
These features may include the provision of on-site dedicated parking space?
Yeah,
Space.
this says on hyphen space site.
So the hyphen.
But we don't have that on ours.
Okay.
We have
Yeah, on-site dedicated parking.
Okay.
You don't?
And
You
then,
might have had it, because we did correct a few typos that maybe
Oh.
you got
okay.
and you probably already,
Share
So
that.
on-site, so we have
You
the
fixed
provision
that.
of on-site dedicated parking space.
And then,
Apostrophe S.
yeah.
And on-site has no space.
That should be
Before
one
site.
word, right?
okay.
But on-site is hyphenated in ours also.
But on-site parking, yeah.
And then I had one other very
Yep.
small one. You probably corrected this. It's in the following page, page 9, under IB.
So there,
I'd be-
you guys must
yeah.
have an old draft because your numbering
Yeah, I
is
don't-
off
Yeah, your
also.
number's a little bit different, sorry.
Okay, so
that's-
numbers are wrong.
I have the
That's
new
different.
one. The one
So
that's.
we're now on page 10. IB is on page 10.
What happened?
Okay.
I don't know.
So
Okay,
it's the paragraph that starts, well, they all start if applicable. This
Yep.
is the 1940 paragraph.
yep,
Refer to the Milton Historical Commission for consideration of its historical architectural significance. Few more lines down, you have the word planning board. You have an extra space in there. And that's probably been corrected already.
Is it,
It's 1, 2, 3, it's 4 lines from the bottom.
After consideration, the Milton Historical Commission may issue a report which may include comments and suggestions to the planning board on these matters and any associated matters
Yeah, so the,
pertinent to the commissioner's responsibility, and the planning board shall consider any such report in its evaluation.
So on ours, that first reference to planning board, it's planning on one line and then board on the other, so the extra space doesn't show up.
yeah,
if it's
so
in
it's
there.
been corrected. Okay. That was all, just two
Yeah,
very
it's not
little.
a big-
Second planning board have the same space left?
it's justified, the margins.
It makes it,
Yeah,
yeah.
when it's justified, the margins
Yeah,
are
different
justified, you're
spacing.
gonna end up having extra spaces, which I think that's the reason, right?
that's
Because
what's
it's justified
happening.
margin.
That's weird, you
Okay.
guys have a different.
Yeah,
sort of
because there's a
Yeah,
lot
good job.
of, there's a lot of
Yeah,
extra
it's
spaces
just-
throughout the
Yes,
document.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's,
the justified.
It's justified margin, which is what I use, because
so maybe, because it's in, if it was pulled from our, it could have been an old
Oh,
document
yeah,
that it was
it's
pulled
fine.
from.
It's,
So I'll make sure that you just have a fresh copy, so. And the warrant, it has the fresh copy, more importantly. Yeah,
Should you read the whole thing again to be sure it's right?
We can do
yeah,
it
we'll
again.
reserve, yeah, exactly. Because we read
Order some
pretty.
pizza?
gonna filibuster the warrant committee?
yeah, but you're right,
Yeah.
though, some of the,
Yeah, but it's a good, I
not
think it's something that, yeah, the neighbors. And the other thing to mention, Josh Fiola, the consultant is gonna be presenting at town meeting.
Yes.
So he'll walk through it, and he is
Okay.
the one who helped us draft this language. So
Nice.
if there's any confusion, he's very good at clarifying too.
I like it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See any hands raised, so thank you very much. We will vote on this, I think, on a future meeting, probably next week.
Okay,
So once you get us that final clean copy
great.
for our review, we'll vote. We'll have a vote on it, so, and we'll
That sounds
also, okay.
And we'll make sure you have that map too, because that's
Yeah, the maps.
Thank you.
great.
Okay, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks
and
so
thank you
much for
your,
coming.
thanks for your patience.
It was a pleasure. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Started.
See you.
Yeah. A lot of work they've put into this in several years now. I've been hearing a lot about it. And it is a dense document. There's a lot in here, a lot of good things in here. We'd like to have maybe a brief discussion about this. Members at home,
That's well done.
anybody have any thing they'd like to discuss? It's contained. And I include the floodplain too, but really the overlay.
I think it's awesome. I think it's
I do too.
great work by everybody.
It's well done.
And the fact that the neighbors are all in support is a miracle of miracles.
Meredith, can I stop you before you walk out? This was a unanimous decision by the planning board, correct?
Yes, definitely.
I just wanted to get that on the record for us.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
Thank
And all the information, the survey, everything is online, is on the planning board website, so.
Thank you for all your work.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Sorry, Lori.
Oh, no, I think that's good. I think that it's great that, I remember going to one of the very early meetings thinking, oh, this is gonna be terrible.
I remember.
Yeah, so I think it's great.
Yeah, I've been to a number of meetings, and I would say people are happy with the evolution of it, and they felt like they listened to what the neighbors' concerns were, which doesn't always happen, but no, I shouldn't say that. But I think it did. People were pleased with the outcome on it, and I think it enhances the downtown.
So Brian, I watched a bunch of them too. Like when people were just giving the overlay props, it was EMA, but were these also like individual people who were at the hearing? Who were just coming forward being like, this is great, or was it EMA, or was it a combination of the two?
No, it was just neighbors.
Okay.
It was just the neighbors.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
That is really
Yeah.
good.
Anybody have anything at home? Jay or anybody? Julie?
No,
We're gonna
it's
revisit
Judy.
this when they get us a clean copy back, which will be next week, and we can have a vote on it at that time. But I'm not, as a chair, I'm not seeing any problems with this document from any member at this point. Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, I think it's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Really well done.
Tom, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Judy.
Oh, thank you, good. So this is for the June meeting.
Correct.
And do you anticipate anything else being presented for the June town meeting?
MBTA
Okay,
and maybe a historical bylaw.
okay,
But I received an email. They're trying to keep it as light as possible for the June meeting.
yeah, a one-night affair.
Yes, but we will be seeing the lighting bylaw in May. So we still have that one other article that we have to deal with.
Do you, I kind of am looking at the bottom of my computer and it says 4/23. And we know that the town meeting is, the first week of May. Do you know when we might see the lighting bylaw?
Their language is being revised as we speak. I have been unable to secure a speaker, both an expert to opine on lumens. I actually reached out to two people. Two people have not responded to me, and this was over 2 weeks ago. In addition to that, we will not have any member of the select board at this time to come down and present the article to us. So I'm hoping to get to speak to our town administrator and get some more information maybe through town council. But I'm not going to have, no one from the select board, I think at this point, is going to be presenting to us.
Is it, I think it's my understanding, and I probably need to be corrected, that the article itself came from the select board?
Yes.
So I guess that goes to the question. It seems odd that they would not come and clue us in, if you will.
Yeah, it's helpful, Judy, as you know, you've been on here for 3 years, just having someone coming down and talking about it and giving, their thought process, their analysis, the origins, those types of things I think are very important when we're advising town meeting. And I think really stepping inside the head of the author or the individual who is really creating the product is very helpful to us. And it's actually, disappointing to a degree when we don't have that guidance as a unelected, appointed board. But I'll do my best, Judy, and see what I can do to educate.
All right, thank you. Tom?
Can I ask a question? Sure. Did the select board vote for the lighting? Has this been like, did they never voted on it? They don't need to?
They don't.
Oh, I thought they had to in order to propose.
They
Well, they vote
put it on.
to put it on. They don't vote. They don't necessarily have to
agree
vote
with
for
it?
approval or frequent times on the floor of town meeting they've been asked to vote on things, to give their recommendations. So at that point they're kind of forced to make a recommendation. But like Lori said, their vote was just to put it on the warrant.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably sound like a broken record on this, but like, but
No, right? Yeah.
I will. But like, it seems like the last town meeting that we had, when people put forth articles that weren't vetted, like we had the thing with the taking away the legal fees, and we had the thing, citizens petitions, we couldn't get anybody to, and the lighting, same thing, we couldn't get anybody to discuss it, so we never delved into it. And then it just floundered at the town meeting and wasted a lot of people's time, and then it got,
Right.
changed or taken out completely.
I thought it was withdrawn. Wasn't it
It
withdrawn?
was
Yeah.
withdrawn.
Initially withdrawn and now it's alive again?
Yeah, it's gonna be coming back to us. The select board still has to do a little work on this, but I am now going outside my guardrails on the agenda.
Okay.
We're discussing
Okay.
we're discussing the thing. So I appreciate it, and Judy, I appreciate what you said, and I obviously ran with it, but it's not something
You're right,
we
it's
can
not on the agenda.
talk about. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah, well,
Tom, can I
Yeah,
add to
please
the
do.
choir? I don't want to beat a dead horse, but maybe this will help you in your endeavors. Yeah, I'm reading the Town of Milton bylaws, as I enjoy doing. And it says, it shall be the duty of the warrant committee to inform themselves concerning those affairs in interest of the town, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, the officers of the town shall, upon their request, meaning us, shall, upon the warrant committee's requests, furnish them with facts, figures, and other information pertaining to their several departments. Now, is the select board officers of the town? I don't know. Is anyone going to arrest the select board if they don't talk to us? No. But it's just one more thing we can point to that says, hey, the bylaws of the town say people are supposed to talk to us. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I know you're doing your best. So
No, Jay, I
thank you for.
You are doing your best.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that, Jay. And I don't think that the information we're looking at is going to be injurious to the town or its citizens. In fact, it's going to be helpful. When we're really going after people's pocketbooks here. I think.
Do you have the bylaws memorized? You.
Yeah, Jay, you're talking to a bylaw committee veteran.
All right. Well done.
But that's the thing, Jay, and like I said, I appreciate you bringing it up at the meeting in that language, because that's why it's just kind of difficult and it's disappointing, because we got to give the best information to town meeting, and when we start at 0, it's kind of hard, especially given the time crunch we're in, but we will persevere. I know we will, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Okay, so I know future meetings have always been a question. I've been working with Meredith for MBTA. I was looking to really kind of push them to come in next week. They most likely will not be available next week to do this. And then we have town meeting starts on Tuesday. So then we have on the 5th. So then we have meetings during the night, the town meeting, and we can't meet. So we're gonna have to figure that out. We're gonna need to have meetings next week, at least as to the lighting bylaw.
Yeah.
Like we gotta have a meeting next week about it, and we have to vote on it. So just keep your eyes out on the calendar. Monday, Tuesday, maybe Thursday, depending on when a speaker, if I can get one, is available, or somebody.
Are we going to still, I'm sorry to interrupt, are we going to still meet even though we're unable to get a speaker to come in?
We need to meet and vote on
Just
it,
to
because
vote on
we
it anyway.
need the
Okay.
green sheet. We need the comment and the green sheet to be submitted. for
Don't we
the town.
need the article if they're
And we
making
also need the
changes?
article too.
Sorry, I know, so,
And they're
yeah.
changing it again. So again, my frustration on the last correspondence I sent everybody, like I didn't have anything to even look at.
And
or
they
send to
want
you.
this on May 5th, not in June,
Yes, this is on,
May 5th.
and it was originally, as I said a couple of months ago, Jay, you can correct me, this was on the June agenda. And then it slid over to May. So it's what the select board wants, so we have to deal with it. So we just need to vote so we can craft a good comment the best we can and get it to Nick Milano.
Okay,
For the town. Okay. I don't see any hands raised. It's 9 o'clock. This could be a warrant committee record.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion from Macy to adjourn. Before I ask for a second, which I may have already gotten, does anybody have any questions, concerns, or anything regarding the planning board articles that we've looked at tonight? I don't see any hands raised. No member here, so we have a motion to adjourn by Macy. Do I hear a second?
Oh, I'll second that.
Second.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
third from Judy.
Second, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Warrant Committee. Thank you, Milton.
Thank you, Chairman.